So here in the beginning, my goal is to move the player. I built that nav mesh last week, and so I want to be able to use it and click and move around. And so the first thing I do is I kind of check where I was last week, what this different scripts do, how I'm doing the collision detection. You can see that it's actually hitting the grid map and logging which grid I clicked on. And so from reading the documentation, I'm like, I can finally get that position I need to start moving. So I'm looking up the raycasting documentation, trying to figure out how it works. It's got a position property, and ta-da, world position. That's exactly what I need. Now the next step is to get that position data to my player so I can actually move it. Doing JavaScript, I would do an event here. So signals seem like the way to go. The idea is that when you click to move, some move to signal is going to be emitted. Yep, move to with a position, and then you'll move the player. And so here I go ahead and call emit signal move to the collision position. Then let's go ahead and I have to have some place to receive that signal, right? And so here I hook up where I receive that signal. I hate the default naming scheme on the signals. They always have that underscore, blah, 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 long crap, blah, blah, blah. I hate that crap. So I always rename it to something that I think is a little bit saner, which is on whatever the event is, signal, whatever. And so I run into my first problem here is I need a script to send a signal to. I can't just send a signal to a random node. So my player is going to have a script on it. And so then I start to wonder, okay, well, I have a player input script, and that player input script is the thing that is using the camera to cast the ray and figure out where you hit. So do I put it in the input player script? And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, I might be better to have a separate script, like a move mob script that can listen to this move signal and then move the mob or player or whatever it's on. And so I go to create that. And we can see my little guy falls off. And I'm creating a new script for it, and navmesh mob. Rename the real-time strategy controller on the camera. That's the thing that makes the edges move. There we go. We got our event. And it's trying to figure out how to hook it all up using signals. Yeah, I'm really learning all of this as I'm doing it. So I'm reading a lot of documentation here. And there's, this function called get simple path. And so that's on the navigation node. And so I want to use that because that's going to give me all the points I need for my mob to get to where it's going to go. And so I'm looking through the different documentations and I'm looking through the example code. So they have this nice example code. It's like, oh, okay, it works great, except both the camera and the robot you're moving are hard coded. And my problem is getting the information to where I want it to go. So this hard coding it in the example like this is all just one script file. Doesn't help me a lot. And so I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I get this active path? And I'm like, okay. And here's some mistake I made is I made this an extends navigation class, but it's not on the navigation node. And at this point in time, I didn't understand that node and its script are kind of a pair and they're going to match. And so if you want to extend a navigation node, it's the script has to be on a navigation node or else it won't work. You can always use the more generic wrapper. Like if you use a spatial, you could do that on anything, but you won't get the methods. You won't be able to access the properties and methods and everything that you want to use. And so here I'm trying to use the get node function to get the player, and I'm wondering why I can't access its position, its translation. And I'm calling it position because that's what I'm used to. Later on, I realized it's called translation here, not position. That's okay. And so now I'm like, how do I, if I need a script on the player and I need to script here and there, how am I going to get the data where I need? How many scripts are involved in getting this information here? And so, I guess I'll just get it there somehow. Let's just try and get it moving and trying to get that signal patched through. And you can see here, I'm working out my thoughts, trying to go, how am I going to get all this to work? And then do some more research. Because I'm trying to figure out, I keep getting that error. Script inherits from type whatever, and I didn't understand at the time about that key thing of the node and the script being the same class, because they're really a pair together. And once I figured that out, I got moving a bit more. You can see here now it's on the navigation node. I have access to the navigation script and all of its functions. And so now I just got to get this navigation, this position, to somebody who can move the actual player and call that get method, that get scene, get node, whatever it was called. And so I spent a little time and I learned about groups. And groups were pretty interesting, but it didn't solve my problem. It wasn't what I was looking for. But I'll have to revisit groups because that looks really interesting. It looks like you can do a lot with groups. And so trying to figure out how I can get, what I want to do is if I have to have a script that has to have this link to a player, I want to make it dynamic as possible where you can set what the player is in the editor versus, me hard coding some path in the script. Because if I hard code some path, it's going to break. If I ever move that script around or try to reuse it somewhere else. And I don't want that. And so I was like, how do I do this export? And it's actually pretty simple syntax, but it took me a little looking around to figure it out. And I didn't quite understand, because, if you just go into the documentation and search for export, it doesn't help. And so I didn't understand exactly what the syntax was, and I have to play around with it a little bit. And then once I get the syntax right, it's also how to actually get the player, the spatial object. And so I'm trying to go, is it spatial? Is it resource? I'm looking through all the different things until I finally find node path. And that's what I want. There's actually an example here that's doing the very thing I want to do once I found that example. And so using that, I can set the player path script variable, and I can choose the player node. And there we go. Now my move to can pass the position and the node I want to move. So then my onMove, my navigation function, could have access to all the information it needs to perform that movement. And so that way, I still have two scripts, which is fine. It's not like 3 or 4 scripts like I was thinking it was going to have to be, with like signals bouncing around all over the place. Like I was worried I was going to have to do something weird like that. No, nothing like that at all. And yeah, here is where I realize it's not position in GD script or Godot, it's translation. I'm used to it being called position and other things. And so once I get that, I can have the actual node position, where I want it to move, and I can get back a list of places to move to, my get simple path. And so now I need to actually move along that simple path. So I realize I can get the simple path, which is great, but I actually still need something to move the player along the path. And so the navigation wasn't the whole solution like I was hoping it would, because I still have to follow that path over time, and the navigation node just gives me the path to follow, not actually moving the player around. And so I'm modifying and figuring out exactly what it is I need. And then on my player, I created the move on path, and it was set path function. And the idea is, okay, the navigation, since the player is a child of navigation, maybe you can just set the call the set path method, or send a signal for set path. And I'm looking to see how the example actually went from this array of nodes to actually moving. And so I just copy and paste its move logic. And there's a couple bugs to fix because, like I said, the original demo hard-coded the robot, hard-coded a bunch of things. But here now it works. I can click and I'm moving around. Awesome. And that's exactly what I wanted. So it works. Yay. And I'm super happy about this because you can click and move and everything moves just like it's supposed to. And so with that working, time to move on to the next item. And so, I have a couple different things I could work on, the animations, the level layout, but I decided to work on the menu itself. And I start adding some other future things I want to do, like because this is supposed to be based on tabletop Pathfinder 2 type thing. Well, eventually, what I want to do is, show your character screen on the character sheet on the screen, which is why I'm spending a little bit of time trying to find a reference of a Pathfinder 2 character sheet, which took longer than I expected. And I'm trying to figure out how to display text and images on the screen as a UI type thing. And so then I go into the 2D API, start learning about the canvas and how this all works. And it's kind of cool because these nodes are really easy to use. They were pretty intuitive. Being a front end developer, maybe I have drawing on some knowledge there, but and so drawing on some of my front end knowledge, I found this pretty easy to work with. Getting the anchors just kind of had to play around with that to figure that out, and trying to figure out what all the different controls are, like what's a panel versus the other options of panel. And so I spent some time playing around with it, doing labels. You know, okay, here's going to be my character sheet. And I got this black background, and there it shows up. Yay! And then I'm getting annoyed at my camera because every time I go mouse towards the edge, my camera jumps off the screen, and that's so annoying. So here, okay, I'm going. what kind of controls are available, what do they do, what are the differences between them, what can I set, how does this anchor stuff and work. So, top, bottom, left, right, how I can make it stick to whatever edge I want. My panel, my label, I'm realizing are not connected the way I thought they were. But that's actually totally fixable with layouts. And so then I start looking into layouts. How does a layout work and what kind of layouts are there? Some pretty cool layouts to play with. It's really, it's a Godot itself is created this way. Godot is written in Godot, from my understanding, and so the whole Godot UI is written using these nodes that I'm learning here. And so, I don't, even when I was like, oh, how would I do this? I know there has to be a way to do it because Godot literally does it. They have tabs and there's draggable and resizable and all that stuff exists. So, it's going to be here and it's not going to be too terribly difficult, I don't think, to figure out. And so it's like, okay, what kind of container do I want? What kind of interface am I actually making here? Playing around with different stuff and reading the documentation. I read the documentation a lot. Yeah, I mean, I was like, oh, it'd be cool to have a colored background. So maybe if I could put a color rectangle back there, and then like the center container centers anything in it. And so I was kind of hoping if I put the color in the center rectangle, it would center it, but it centers it by the top left, not by the center, and it didn't work the way I was hoping. Um, so now let's try a vertical box, and because I'm like, okay, we'll have some text, and let's just do a menu, and then I'll throw some buttons on, and I could just make this that pause, quit menu instead of right now. If you want to quit the game, you hit escape and it just quits. I like to have like open up the menu and then quits. So I'm trying to figure out what all these options are. Really just clicking things and playing around with it, and found that Godot has this theme system which lets you, you know, pick whatever control and then actually change like things like the font and the color and stuff like that. It's like, oh, okay, because I was looking for it in like the tools, or the normal node panel for like the font, like I would in Blender, and I couldn't find it. And I was like, what? How do I set the freaking font here? Well, you have to create a theme, and then with a theme, you can set the font. And so, knowing that, I needed to get some fonts, some open source fonts. And so, I did a little Googling and downloaded like 10 different fonts that are all open source. They're all in the library, or not library. They're all open source and free to use. I check the licenses on them to make sure. And so I'm playing with it and trying to get it to actually display and use the font I want. I realize you have to, it's kind of a weird process because you have to make the theme and save that, and you have to load the font and then save the font as one of these Trez files too. Resource files, text resource files, whatever that Godot uses. And so it's not as simple as just like picking a font. You actually have to like pick a font, turn it into a resource file, then go back in and select that resource file in your theme. And then if you do all that, then it works. And the nice thing, it seems like it's a couple steps, but the nice thing is you can actually have multiple themes, and you can have, you could, in theory, change these themes, I'm sure. So we got the quit button. One button's gonna, go back to game, and one button will be quit. And I'm just trying the different fonts and seeing how they look, because I downloaded like 10 fonts. So it's like, okay, how do each of these fonts look? What's gonna look the best in doing this? And so I'm just playing around and add a cool little tooltip, because I was like, oh, there's like a tooltip option here. What does that do? And then I'm like, okay, so I got a font, but where do I set the font size? I'm used to being able to pick my font and font size, and then what I'm learning from the research I'm doing is that, that resource file I talked about, how you loaded a font and you made this resource file of it. Yeah, the font size is hard coded into that resource file. So when you make that is when you make your size. And so then here I'm making a couple different sizes because I want different size fonts in my game. So I made a 24 point and a 32 point font of this font I was playing with. You can see I'm trying the different, seeing how it looks. And yeah, and that was working. And then as I go on, I decide, I kind of want to see what some of these other fonts look like. So, Public Sans and Overpass, and which Public Sans was interesting because it's made by the government. It's a free font made by the government. So that's cool. I don't actually end up using it. I download all these to just try them out, but I don't use them all. Mostly because I started finding fonts I liked, and so I didn't need to use them all. And there we go. Yeah, Firefox fonts and hack, and I'm not downloading the IBM font. Screw that. But Monoid and all these different ones. I'm just kind of looking at them all. One of the fonts, the link didn't even work anymore, so I didn't get that. And then one of the fonts tried to take me to PayPal to pay for it. I was like, nope. Be careful what you click on the internet. So yeah, here's Monoid, and I was like, okay, this one looks kind of cool. And so I made a Retina one and a regular one. And I'm like, oh yeah, I need different sizes too. So we get our different size fonts. We got 2 different fonts, and they're different sizes. And we have to kind of set the... I was trying to get the rich text label working, and it just wasn't working like I wanted it to work. Joust. How do we pronounce this one? Go in and... yeah, this Joust one was pretty good looking. Taking a look at it. So I make some medium weight, 16 and 24. I start using that throughout the game. Kind of like the look of that. It's nice and thick, like it's like bold, and I think it looks cleaner. And so yeah, we got some fonts. We got a move signal we're trying to use, and so now what I want to do is I want to have that escape button open up this menu instead of just quitting. And so that's exactly what I do. Is there's that signal that's emitted when you hit the escape. So I have that listener on my root node that listens for you hitting the escape key and then emits a signal. And so I just changed that signal to my new menu pause script to open and close the menu, to quit the game, because I still need to be able to quit the game. The old way was just under the escape, so I had to move that logic into here. And I was trying to format, like trying to make it look nicer. And yeah, I didn't need the rich text. And I wanted that margin, and because I'm using that vertical box, it was not letting me set the margin to move that menu over there. And so I was like, okay, well, that must be why there's a margin container to keep your margin when you're in this kind of condition. And it didn't work. And I don't know why it didn't work. So I still don't understand why margin container exists or what its point is if it doesn't work. I assume I just used it wrong. I'm going to try this a bunch. Yep. And so, one of the things I wanted to do is, it was kind of annoying hiding and showing the menu as I was like debugging. And so I added this on ready, and when the game boots, it just closes the menu. So that way in the editor, I can keep the menu visible at all times. But when you actually run the game, the menu does not start visible. It's kind of a hack, but it worked. And so instead of trying to use the margin, I ended up using the center container, which worked wonderfully. Good. Worked well. Okay. I want to adjust that camera controller because it's really annoying me. Every time I get to the edge, it moves, and I don't want it moving when the menu's open. So I add this, enable disabled ability is enabled. And that way, when you open the menu, it can tell the RTS camera, stop doing it. Don't move the camera anymore. The menu's open. We don't want to be scrolling around the map while the menu's open. And so, that's all that was. And so, I create a little function, call it by a signal, easy peasy, fresh and squeezy. And there we go. We now have a menu, which means the next thing is animation. So I go into Blender and I take my model, and I am not very good at Blender. So I spend quite a lot of time just trying to get my windows showing me what I want to see, which is I want to see my animations. I want to see all the different animations I have, and I want to be able to upload animations to it. And they have this non-linear NL, whatever it is. It's just I still struggle with this interface because I don't quite understand what everything's doing or what I'm trying to do here. NLA tracks, yeah. Non-linear animation. I don't understand this NLA tracks or why the interface is so complicated. Like, you can add and not delete, and you can't edit some things, but you can edit other things, and I don't understand it. I really don't. I basically am just poking at it until I get what I want. And somehow it works. And so, okay, it's like, there we go. So now I have a new model with another animation on it. And so I'm like, okay, why is my animation not showing up? I keep going here, my current animations, and it just has this nothing, this stop. I'm like, where the heck are my animations? Right? Do I need an animation player? Well, it didn't work. I'm like, what is going on? And so the thing I'm not getting yet, and I will, is that it's in the actual, when I loaded up the GLB into its own scene, right? It came with an animation player already. I didn't have to add it. And the animation player has all the animations in it from Blender. And so I can just use those. And so what I need to do is figure out what's the best way to structure my player so that I can use the animation, I can have my collisions, I can have my kinematic body, I can have my collision shape and all that stuff. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out here, and I'm kind of just winging it. I know PC, my original one, had animations, but it didn't have any collisions. Number 2 had collisions but no animations. So 3 hopefully has them both. And so as I try to get here, what I'm starting to realize is that to do the animations, I need to call the play animation function. And how do I do that? Yeah, how do I do that? I'm not sure. And so, I'm gonna have to figure that out. And I think it has to do with the node structure and the way things are laid out, because somehow I need my my level scene script to be able to call into my player's instance scene. And here I'm noticing every time I click, my player always runs backwards towards towards where I clicked. And so I like try flipping the model around, and I try some different stuff. Eventually I just change it in code. I change a plus to a minus to get that fixed. Yeah, that translation code. And so yeah, I'm like, it still doesn't work. I actually have to call the play animation function somehow, but it's inside my scene instance. And so how does my move script do that? And here's where I go, okay, I changed that translation plus direction normalized to a translation minus direction normalized to go forward. And I'm like, okay, I do want to do a move and slide, but wait, and I'm not on the right object, and I'm trying to figure out what is the way to structure this. That's my big question now, and that's what I'm going to be doing next week, is figuring out how to structure these little scenes that are used in your bigger scene, and how to do this communication across them. And so I'm doing research into Godot's examples and how to make a player object. But one of the things I run into, especially with like this project, is a lot of their examples are using 2D objects when I'm doing 3D, which isn't always like, doesn't actually always hurt the example or my ability to understand the example. It's always, you really want to find an example. So thank you for listening and watching, and hope you have a wonderful day, because I am done for the night. It is bedtime. So have a wonderful night or day, and see you later.